justification.
Karin Giannone. Meanwhile, Iran has again rejected suggestions that one of its missiles brought down a Ukrainian passenger jet on Wednesday, killing 176 people. The picture still remains unclear, but what we do know is that the flight took off from the Tehran airport just after 6 in the morning, but just 2 minutes later, the data on that flight stopped. Well, in New York for us now is Michael Bociurkiw, a global affairs analyst and former spokesman for the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, who worked at the crash site of the downed Malaysia Airlines passenger jet in eastern Ukraine in 2014. Michael, good of you to join us. This must bring back memories for you. What are your thoughts? What do you believe the picture we have is?
Good to be with you again, Karin. Well, it does bring back thoughts. In fact, just a few hours ago, we started receiving reports that the Iranians have taken the very unusual decision of clearing the crash site, which is an open crime scene, with bulldozers. And this brings back memories to when we arrived, my team from the OSC, to the crash site of MH17 in eastern Ukraine in 2014. There were remains scattered all over. There were human remains. And you know, Karin, what tends to happen in these types of tragic disasters is the human remains get scattered. In fact, in Ukraine, we were finding human remains weeks and sometimes months afterwards. So these are crucial pieces of evidence. Everything from the fuselage to the black boxes to even the human remains hold clues as to what happened up there in the air. So they must be preserved at whatever cost.
And what are the similarities you're seeing here about those difficulties of investigating a crash like this in a country that might not make that investigation easy or transparent?
Well, two things here. One is that even though the Iranians say they've invited the U.S. NTSB here in the United States, Boeing, I think the Canadians have been invited. As far as I'm aware, they're only going to be given observer status, which means basically they will be on the sidelines and the Iranians will show them whatever they want to show. And secondly, going back to, again, MH17, it now appears that the Russian missile reportedly used in the downing of this aircraft is very, very similar to the missile used to bring down MH17. I mean, it's almost an eerie similarity. The technology used is basically that missile goes up, it explodes near the aircraft, and it sprays it with shrapnel, bullet-like shrapnel, and that makes the aircraft unworthy. So I bring this up because those will be key clues, looking at the fuselage to see whether they hold those telltale signs. Again, another civilian air crash has Russian fingerprints, I'm afraid, all over it.
It has been years for the details of what happened in MH17 to emerge. Obviously, that's been disputed by Russia. What do you think about whether we will ever know the truth in this case?
Yeah, well, these things take a long time. I mean, the MH17 criminal trial is only going to begin a few weeks from now, but yet the investigators are still appealing for eyewitnesses in eastern Ukraine. These things take a long time. They require a lot of patience. It will take a while to find out what happened. But I should also point out that one of the key missing elements in MH17 was primary radar data from Russia. And from what I'm hearing is the Iranians are not going to be too keen to share their radar data with the Americans or whoever else. And also, Karin, interesting to note that this morning, the Ukrainian Foreign Minister Prostayko echoed Zelensky yesterday and said, well, it could be a missile, but it could be something else. So the Ukrainians, I noticed, are taking a very cautious approach as to the cause.
Very briefly, why do you think they're being so cautious? Is that because they don't want access blocked to the crash site particularly?
I agree. I mean, they're one of the few governments that have relatively good relationships with the Iranians. They do have an embassy there. They have a big team on the ground. 2 airplanes came over. And Canada is going to be looking at the Ukrainians to facilitate access to the site, but also possibly even for the repatriation of bodies. Canada does not have relations with Iran, so it's going to be very difficult. And again, Karin, I remember from MH17, all those relatives wanted was the return of their loved ones, their human remains, and I'm afraid that could take a while in this case, and it could be further complicated by lack of consular access.